Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Joy of White Women Doing the Work. I'm Karen Fleshman, founder of the Interracial Sisterhood Coalition and of SOS, Spirit of Sisterhood. And I'm so honored and delighted to be joined here by Dr. Cheryl Wozniak, who was a participant in the first cohort of the program formerly known as Becoming Trustworthy, now known as SOS, Spirit of Sisterhood. And I'm just so grateful to you, Cheryl, for making time for this conversation.
Thanks for having me, Karen.
How are you?
Oh, well, during this challenging time, I have to say that I'm doing better than I think a lot of folks and this speaks to just the title, which I love, of this gathering today around joy, and that is because I know that despite all the chaos and what's going on, I think some of what can lead us to a place of feeling a lack of joy is when we feel like everything around us is taking our life by storm and we don't feel like we're doing anything to counter that. And so I think part of my joy comes from knowing that despite where we're at this time in history where people would want to convince us that we're not this is not the time to talk about racial justice and to fight against racism, that's what I'm a part of, that's what my life is about. And being in community with you and with the other women who were part of formerly Becoming Trustworthy, but now your SOS Sisterhood here. It just reaffirms, right, that I'm on the right track and I'm in the company of really good people.
Ah, thank you so much for sharing that. Why, I think um, yes, there are so many negative messages saying, racism is inevitable and we have the power, racists have the power, and we're gonna attack you, we're gonna fire you, we're gonna quit, we're gonna make you stop having DEI programs, like all of this negativity. But every single day you and I get to wake up and decide how we're going to show up that day, and racism is a system of oppression, and it is also a personal choice. And I can wake up every day and say, you know what? Today, I am not going to believe that there is any racial hierarchy. I am going to see the divine in everybody and the full human equality in everybody. And I am going to do all that I can to repair what my ancestors created, what I continue to benefit from, and to build something totally new where everybody thrives. And I'm so grateful to you and the other sisters from Spirit of Sisterhood for making this same choice too. And I think that this is part of the challenge. I think a lot of people think, oh, if I'm in a white anti-racism group, we're going to sit around and feel guilty and shameful all the time.
Mm,
Um, and trust, I have felt intense guilt and shame as I have gone on this journey. Certainly, there is a lot to atone for, both what my ancestors did and things that I have done during my lifetime, right? But I think we have to process those feelings. When we can process those feelings in a small group, and then we can, and I'm not saying get to the other side, because anti-racism
right.
is a lifelong journey. We're going to continue to make mistakes and cause harm and have to repair for the rest of our lives. But when we can become more attuned to how to show up, when we can develop lasting relationships based in trust And when we can expand our imagination to think not just about what it is that we're currently dealing with, but what could be, what we all want, um, it's such a joyful feeling.
Yes, I agree. And you know, when you told me about the title and asked what I thought about it, um, and why I would believe that joy is so important to the work of racial equity, racial justice, I've been thinking about that, and I thought, well, first of all, I think joy is important in every aspect of life, right? I mean, we get one life here in this form. So, I think it's important to find joy in everything. And I think that you spoke of the system, right? The system that created this hierarchy, the systems and the powers at be that want us to not talk about racism, who've taught us and instilled in us this fear of talking about our race. Um, that's the very thing that we're up against, right? And so if we can show up joyfully in the work, that's a form of resistance for me, right? To say, I will not give in to this idea that it's too hard to talk about, or I will not stay in a place of shame. Of course, I've felt it. Of course, every time I learn something new about our history, it's hard to hear. And yet, by staying in it and doing the work, I can say to anyone who's listening, if you're feeling like, how does one stay with it? It's like, well, it's like anything. You build a resistance to the negative and you continue to see through the lens of like what's possible on the other side. And what's possible on the other side of white women facing their history and joyfully showing up and doing the work is the beauty of the sisterhood of women of color, where we're not so afraid to be in the company of and share our most human selves, right? And it doesn't mean we're going to do it perfectly, and it doesn't mean we're never going to say anything that we wish we hadn't. But by staying with it and committing to that, the journey, um, there is so much joy from the experience of the growth that you experience and the sisterhood that you find in this work.
Wow, Cheryl, that deeply resonates with me. Angela Davis recently spoke at my church, and before she spoke, the choir and band performed, and she talked about how central joy is to the struggle for Black liberation. That Black people have always practiced joy as a form of resistance, as a form of survival. That's the only way they could have endured all of the terrible things that white people inflicted upon them, right? And that we have to, and she said, joy is not an afterthought in the struggle. It's not like the reward at the end. It's something that you do all throughout the struggle. And that is something that that's why I started the Interracial Sisterhood Coalition. Exactly what you said. I wanted to create a safe opt-in space for women to form lasting bonds with each other, outside of the workplace, to actually listen to each other's stories. And what you spoke about before, how the system has taught us, particularly white women, how we have been silenced through violence. When you think about the hundreds of years of conditioning that white women had in Europe before white men literally imported us to this country to police the plantation and to raise the next generation of white supremacists, and they tied all the laws together of marriage, of property, of slavery. It is so diabolical. But I think often about the white women who were called witches and burned at the stake. Who were they? The women who were older, the women who were healers and midwives, the women who were the keepers of faith and religion and potions and all of those things. Um, the women who dared to defy male authority. They would
Exactly.
call them a witch, parade them through the town, have the whole town come out and cheer and clap, and then burn them at the stake and put their kids in the front row to watch them burn. I mean, how terrible is that? That is what our ancestors survived. But the lesson that it taught us, how would you describe the lesson that you think that
Yeah.
that taught us?
Oh, exactly. I mean, as I heard you say it, it just made me think, it's like, so anyone watching who might have had the wisdom, like you said, of the women as they grew, the elders who could see through the lies, who could see what what they were being seduced into being a part of. Should they want to speak up? Well, the example was given, this is what will happen to you if you do. And while that can say that that doesn't happen today, just like slavery doesn't happen in the same form, it just happens in another form. And
Yes.
so it is part of our history, and it is, if we're not mindful of it, if we don't educate ourselves, if we're not aware of how it's playing out and what it looks like now, then we are easily drawn into that. And part of that, as white women, is being taught and conditioned to do what's proper, to, conform, to be quiet, to second guess, your thoughts and not believe in your intuition, but um, to look to people in places of authority, right? So, and that's all, historically, like, we know the number of men who hold positions of power, right? So if you're always looking to that, you have only the voices of those systems and that viewpoint, as opposed to the wide range. And I'm not here to disparage or discount the male perspective, but just to say the woman's perspective is also important, as is the perspective of people of color, of people, indigenous people, of people of all the different races, cultures, backgrounds, right? This is how we're going to be better. But we've been conditioned to have this idea of the safety and the elevated status of a profile of a person in authority. And the rest of us are there to just um, look to that and have our voices be lesser than subdued.
100%. It is our intergenerational trauma
Yeah.
response, right? To freeze, to fawn, which
Yeah.
means to appease the person causing us trauma, or to flop, to just like check out completely. And this is how this was white women's survival techniques. And then to align with the most violent and inflict violence ourselves, because that will create our safety. That will create our dominance, will keep us safe. And you think about how white women behaved during slavery. It's just excruciating, the kind of psychological and physical violence that we did to Black women. And I highly recommend everyone read Dr. Stephanie Jones Rogers. They Were Her Property, A History of White Women as Slave Owners in the American South. I could only read like a couple of pages at a time because it is so difficult to confront how horrible we are. Um, but again, we have to face that so that we don't continue to replicate those behaviors. I just saw a journal of social psychology study about who are the white women who get promoted to positions of leadership in corporations. And it is the white women who do not disrupt the status quo. It's the white women who are considered yes women.
Yes. That's exactly the image I had. Those, to the extent that you can show up and perform as close to the behaviors of the white dominant, the patriarchy, then you would be the ones that would be allowed to be in those positions. But should you have a different point of view, right, and or challenge the status quo, then I would imagine you would be the first to go, or, would be dismissed. But Karen, you were just talking about I love how you, every time I talk with you, you bring up the history, right? And I'm always learning from you. So what I want to say is that one of the things I appreciated most about your, the course that you provide is that I learned something new every time we were together, right?
Mm,
And so as someone who, before joining the Spirit of Sisterhood, I considered myself, a very passionate person, committed to racial and social justice work. One of the things about my history is, for those of you tuning in, is I had a 35-year career as an educator, teacher, and administrator, and it was, racial equity work became kind of a central area of focus for me, especially in the latter years of my career, when I was responsible for bringing in speakers and providing education for the teachers and the administrators in the district. And yet, I think I realized shortly into knowing you that there's a whole area of our history, and that is around the history of white women's participation in the years of, chattel slavery, and upholding those beliefs that there is this racial hierarchy. And so I would just encourage people who, like, think about this, to think about this through the lens of being in community where there is a safe space to consume the history, learn about it, process it, come and ask questions, talk about, what hit you, what you wrestled with in community with other women who probably, like me, never learned this growing up. And I can say, even as a teacher, right, did not
yes.
learn this and did not teach this to my students. So, I really appreciate how you and you always do it. You bring this information in a way that I've never felt like you're pointing the finger at me. Like, you're always contextualizing it as part of the history. It's part of what we have inherited. But
Hmm.
like you said earlier, we have a choice every day to show up knowing that that's part of our history, and to be a part of changing the course of history moving forward.
Thank you so much for that. The reason why I I share that. I mean, first of all, because I want all women to be safe and free. I want all people to be safe and free, okay? And I believe that I was sent to this earth to unite women across difference so that we can secure our collective safety and freedom, that we can never get safe and free together. and that out of all the groups of marginalized people in America, white women have by far the most power and privilege. If we start to become change agents, if we form true solidarity, interracial solidarity, we can transform everything because we vastly outnumber the white men who hold positions of power. And why I believe it's so important to really understand this history, two things. Number one, Dr. Twyla Baker coined the term translation exhaustion, and I'm going to read the quote, the definition. The idea that indigenous people or any marginalized person group engaging with the larger population on a given subject or topic related to bias must first set the stage in terms of historical context all the way to current day state of affairs before even addressing said topic of bias over and over again due to the lack of education and background the listener has, a direct impact of erasure of true Indigenous history beyond the cursory mention in our school systems. So that's what I am trying to prevent. I am trying to help white women get the history and the current context so that when we show up in interracial spaces, we are not depending on indigenous women, black women, etc., to educate us. Instead, we can come in with our sleeves rolled up, ready to get to work on the current issue that we are facing. And I know from my own lived experience that we are not taught this stuff in school. You know, I went to uh, uh, public schools my whole life. My high school in a small town in Colorado, we were consistently the state football champions, the state basketball champions. So obviously, the coaches were very highly regarded, and the coaches served as our history and social science teachers. Why? Because those are the easy subjects, you know? And so we don't learn all of this stuff. It's deliberately withheld from us. And we have a racially segregated school system. I just listen, everyone has to listen to this. Um, Two guys, Moaz and Aziz. I believe Moaz is Israeli and he lost his parents in October 7th. And Aziz is Palestinian and he lost his beloved, beloved older brother to torture in an Israeli prison. And, but they were Facebook friends. They'd met each other because they're both travel professionals. And a few months after October 7th, Aziz reached out to Moaz and said, I see you and I feel your pain. And they started this. I'm getting tingles just even talking. You got to check it out. I will put the link in the comments. But we just have to. Oh, they were talking about that's where I was leading to, that the schools are so segregated. The Israeli kids go to Israeli schools, the Palestinian kids go, and the history is deliberately withheld. Israeli kids are taught that there was nothing there before people started immigrating there, that it was just like a desert and they came and they created this whole thing. And I was thinking about the American public school system, exact same thing. We are sent to racially segregated schools, and the truth about this history is deliberately withheld from us. And then we're inundated with the media, social media, all this stuff very intentionally designed to build up stereotypes and lies and make us believe that they are true. And so we have to bust out of that and really educate ourselves.
Yeah, as you were talking, about and you said it right there at the end, it is all by design, right? So we know the history of redlining and the way that played out in our schools and even though we have laws saying schools are not segregated, they're more segregated than ever by choice, right? By how we as white people decide to live, and how we are just inundated by lies from the media around, fear instilled in us about communities. Um, and all of that is intentional. But it's really interesting what you said. I want to share just personally. So I'm here in California, but I've born and raised in Ohio. And I was back home in Ohio this past week. And my daughter and I traveled through different areas of the city. And I was sharing with her how I grew up in a suburb. And I had no idea that 20 minutes from my home, there were all Black communities. And one of those communities was one that I ended up teaching at. Um, that was nearly an entirely Black school, and I, as a white teacher, was there, uh, serving the students of that community. And I thought about, well, this time when I was in Ohio, I was thinking about how little I knew then about the history. I knew nothing about the intentional design of cities and the placement of where freeways and things were put in to separate communities, and communities being redlined. And I thought about what a different teacher I would have been.
Mm.
I think I still worked really hard, but as the typical white teacher then, I really took the my role to be one to save the students in that community from their cycle of poverty. And while I did celebrate every child for who they are, can see so much more that I could have done. And in the work that I'm committed to, which is, returning as a coach, and a consultant in the education profession to support administrators doing this work and teachers, I really thought about a piece of every um, a key piece of this work is to educate the community, or to make sure the community of faculty, of teachers, are educated about the history of that particular community. And it's the first time I connected those two things. So when I think about, the impact of the SOS Spirit of Sisterhood, and how that work has impacted me, I can see the thread that just continues to be pulled through in my life, that, learning my history, staying with this body of work, and then as I see myself continue to show up and ask myself, what next? What is next for me in my contribution to racial equity work and in the area of education? This is the first time I put that together, but I thought it can fundamentally shift how teachers working in a community see that community when they know the history. And it really allows you to then shift what the narrative is out there, especially for all of our teachers who work in what we refer to as Title I schools, where there's higher rates of low socioeconomic families, or just very racially diverse communities that tend to have be in that category. But just to know and understand the community through that lens, and to be able to talk about it as a white teacher, and to build your confidence in talking about race and matters of race when you are leading that classroom. Because the thing I want to say is that the older, especially our middle and high school students, want to have these conversations. They're looking to educators to lead those discussions. And so again, I invite any white teacher who's out there who's looking for a safe space to come into, And I don't want to imply that you are not studying the history, right? But I think there's always more to learn. But this is a space to process what you're learning and to be in community with other white women.
Thank you so much for raising that, Cheryl. And three things I want to say. Number one, um, white women are disproportionately represented as teachers, as social workers, as nurses, as in all these positions where we can use our authority to either really help somebody or really, really harm somebody. And it's so important that white women who are in these positions, and I love your idea of really understanding the history of the community and the history of this country, and having the skills to relate across difference as equals. And to me, that really needs to have we really need to process our intergenerational trauma, right? We hold that inside of us, both the trauma that we have experienced and the trauma that we have inflicted on people of color, that our ancestors inflicted on people of color, is inside of us. And they're holding the intergenerational trauma that their ancestors experienced at the hands of white women. So we have to process our intergenerational trauma and learn how to show up with our nervous systems regulated, not clenching and trying to exert our control and authority, be a Karen, but to really relax and to learn how to relate. That is so, so important. And that's why a major aspect of Spirit of Sisterhood is working on the relational piece. What is it to relate across differences of age, race, class, and sex as an equal and not treat somebody that they are lesser than? And this is something that really breaks my heart, is that white people's social networks in this country are on average 90% white, and 2/3 of white people's social networks are 100% white, which is, of course, the natural outcome of going to segregated schools, living in segregated neighborhoods, etc. But when you think about how much damage that is causing and how it is perpetuating the racial wealth gap, so many things, because how do we learn about opportunities? How do we get jobs? Is through word of mouth, right? So white people are exclusively exchanging opportunities with other white people. And we're not learning how to relate with people as equals because we're in a silo with other white people. And I'm just curious your reflections on that. And oh, yes, yes. And I also have a great thank you, Sandra Kelly. Thank you for this conversation. My community suffers a slow burn of frustration and despair as we watch white female climb over us in empowerment and status due to the Civil Rights Act. Thank you, Sandra, for raising that. That is something we definitely go into in Spirit of Sisterhood, is that white women's rights in this country were paid for by Black blood in the civil rights movement. That a handful of white women did participate in and fought alongside our Black siblings. The majority of white women did absolutely nothing, and then another group of white women avidly opposed the Civil Rights Act and did everything they could once it was enacted to impede desegregation. They if their school district was being forced to desegregate, they would be there demanding that it remain segregated, etc. And yet Who are the number one beneficiaries of the Civil Rights Act? White women. That is how we got protections from employment discrimination. That is how we got protections from sexual harassment in the workplace, et cetera, et cetera. Yet we do not acknowledge that. We climb up and get these positions of power, and instead of embracing other people and bringing them along with us, we become these yes women who will maintain the status quo for the white men in positions of power, and we will oppress and compete with and undermine and do all kinds of treacherous things, particularly to Black women in the workplace. And this has to stop. This has to stop. And the only way it's going to stop is if white women choose a different way of being. Thank you for raising this point, Sandra. We really appreciate it. I'm curious your reactions, Cheryl.
Yeah. Well, yes, thank you, Sandra, for raising that. And so this is what I want to, couple things. One is, Karen, when you gave the statistics, and I've heard those before, and I've thought, yeah, that was me, a large percentage of my life. And when I share that now it's not true, I don't say this through the lens of like, oh, look at me, but just again, what's possible? What's possible um, when you put aside the fear of engaging in these conversations, of doing this work, of joining and being part of communities like this, like the interracial sisterhood. Or I want to, if I may, give the shout out to Dr. Lynn Hurdle and her son Jason, because this was another community that I was in. They, as a Black mother and son who devote their part of their life's work to working with white people and creating a safe space. I was part of their On the Matter of Race course. Being able, or being in those spaces and being willing to learn and show up and be vulnerable gives you the confidence to then break away from these patterns of safety and to continue that cycle of of maybe breaking out of like living in an all white community or attending an all white church, right? Whatever those ways, or, initiating the conversation with a woman of color in your workplace that you might have otherwise felt like you couldn't do. But that's what's possible on the other side of that. Another thing is just us being here together, Karen, and hearing or reading Sandra's comment, and both of us saying yes, not denying it, not defending it, acknowledging it, and say yes, and that is why it's so important. Because, like you said, and what she's pointing out, when we know our history, we get to share that and educate and raise that awareness for the women who are walking and moving through life, listening to these ideas that affirmative action has no place, when we white women are the ones who have benefited the most through affirmative action, through the civil rights. So this is an ignorance on our part, and we can do better, right?
Yes.
And then what I want to share too is just, again, we talk about what the opportunity of what there is to learn, and we're talking all about the socialization that we've grown up with. So I just want to name like something I refer back to the frameworks you gave us, you shared with us around the cycle of socialization and the cycle of liberation, right? That pattern that we've been conditioned and socialized, the way you pointed out earlier on the call, of what we're born into and how we're conditioned to show up as white women the way we do. But we can be liberated, we can become liberated, but part of that is just being willing to face our history and not run from it. And I would say that is something too that we just need to acknowledge as white women, is that we have been, I think you know, used the term infantilized, right? This idea of like we're weak. This is what the patriarchy wants us to believe, that white women have to be protected, and so we can't hear these hard things, you know, but we can. And yes, it's going to be hard and painful. And so I just want to say again, this is why we need this white um, space, because those tears that we shed do have no place in the spaces with our women of color, right? They are not there to lift us up and support us and reassure us. We need to do that work in these spaces. So again, I just want to give a shout out to the offering that I know you want to share with any white women on the call around this opportunity to be part of a community where you can do this work, where you're provided the tools, the safe space, the opportunity for dialogue, a way to examine the history, to learn from it and grow from it.
Thank you, Cheryl. I love that. And you're getting a shout out. Thank you so much, MB Andrade. This conversation is very interesting and needed. I appreciate Cheryl's transparency as she shared her experience. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I meant to say, Karen, this conversation is interesting and needed. I appreciate Cheryl's transparency. Yes, yes, 100%. And we're so grateful to you for tuning in. Um, there was something I wanted to say about something you said, but of course I can't remember what it was. Oh, I think it's about the joyful piece, right? Is that when white women, oh, that's what I wanted to say. Okay. If white women want to break out of our all white social circles, we are going to have to be the ones to initiate. Okay. Black women are done, done, done. You know, they call themselves the 92% because 92% of them voted for Kamala, fundraised for Kamala, door knocked for Kamala, went full court press, everything they could do to get her elected. Kamala told us what was going to happen if the other guy got elected. Lo and behold, for the third presidential election in a row, the majority of white women voted for the other guy. And look where we are now. How much could have been averted had we just, as my friend's bumper sticker says, listened to Black women.
Yes.
And I refuse to pass this work to another generation. I'm going to keep out here struggling and calling my white sisters in and encouraging us to make these changes. Y'all, we could change everything. There's a lot of shifts happening right now. I know it's a terrible time. We just saw the ex-lieutenant governor of Virginia kill his wife in the home where their children were. Their children had to call the 911. Then there was that online school for men to teach them how to rape and drug their wives and bring other. I mean, it's just unreal. We have the Epstein class in positions of power all throughout the government, suppressing and not only government but every single institution, um, protected each other, very wealthy, powerful individuals, foreign governments, all this stuff involved. So it is overwhelming. But I want us to look at Eric Swalwell and how fast he went down. And why did it happen? It wasn't because of mainstream media. It was because of an online influencer, Mrs. Frazzled, posted a picture of her with Eric Swalwell and said some nice things about him. And people slid into her DMs and said he's actually a terrible person who has harmed me and other women I know. And she started going down that rabbit hole. And that is how he was forced to withdraw from the California governor's race and um, resign from Congress. Okay. When women believe each other's stories, when we stand in unity, the pen is mightier than the sword. You know, we can transform things. We can hold these men to account. We can transform these institutions. And I'm telling you, two quotes guide everything I do. One from the poet Adrienne Rich: the the connections among women are the most problematic, the most feared, and potentially the most transformative force on the planet. Right?
Yes.
They don't want us talking with each other.
No, they do not.
They do not. So we got to learn how to relate with each other. And Audre Lorde said the greatest challenge to women's joint political power is the inability to address race and the implications of race. So this is why we do this work. Let's see. Shout it from the rooftops. Say it, Sandra. Say it, Sandra. Yes, shout it from the rooftops. I thought Swalwell was a good, I did not like that guy because he was always very pro cop. And then my beloved friend and mentor, Pamela Price, was the first Black woman elected Alameda County District Attorney. And he came after her to like get her recalled. He was horrible, horrible to her. And now you notice the district attorney in New York is investigating him. The district attorney of Alameda County, who was Pamela's replacement after she was recalled, is not investigating him. So I never liked the guy. I was definitely not going to vote for him for governor, but plenty of people were. He got tons of endorsements. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you. These abusers are very, they can sometimes portray themselves as the greatest allies, and he did seem like a good guy, like with the Trump impeachment trial and stuff like that. But then lo and behold, you see how they really are. And it just hurts because I can imagine, because this has happened to me, I'm a young woman, so enthralled with this leader, and I'm going to go work for this leader, and I just think, oh my God, someone I admire so much is going to hire me to do this. And I'm so excited. And then that person sexually harasses you, or worse still, sexually assaults you. That is very bad for you. That is really, really harmful and such a betrayal of trust. And my heart goes out to all these Swalwell survivors, all the Epstein survivors, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, you're in St. Louis, Missouri. Yes, yes. I think you have we have the wonderful, why can't I think of her name? Corey. Why can't I think of Corey's last name? Who's running now again back to get back into Congress, and you have a wonderful district attorney there in St. Louis. Okay, I'm sorry, we're like dabbling and dribbling all over the place here. But I just want to see, are there any final thoughts you want to share with everybody, Cheryl or Sandra or MB Andrade? Do you want to share anything so we can wrap up?
Well, what I was thinking of is, again, there are times, especially where we're in the times we're living, where the influx of the news and every day, right? We're hearing so many horrendous, things where people in positions of power are abusing that power, and so much harm is caused. And I think that, many of us as women, we're as the matriarchs of our family, as we're often leaders in so many ways, and it can feel very overwhelming. So I just want to encourage people listening to really go back to what we said early on, which is that, the choice we have each day is to be all consumed by and feel so overwhelmed that, we can feel paralyzed and feel like helpless and hopeless, like there's nothing we can do. But th- instead we can choose to within our sphere of influence. So, mine is clearly in education. And I can say that there are still parts of me that feel very embarrassed or ashamed when I look back. Yes, keep going. I can look back at my career and think, how could I have been so ignorant? How could I have been, you know, drawn into those lies that I was told or not? I wish I could go back and do it all over again. Well, I can't, right? Um, all I can do now is look and say, what can I contribute now? And that is why I'm determined, for as long as my health and vitality allows, that I will take what I've learned and use it for good. That's why I'm committed to coaching any white, equity-centered leader whose heart and passion is there for changing the statistics that we know. You shared all this, some statistics, the statistics we have in education around the gaps, in achievement in between our white students and Black students and um, all students of color. It's an atrocity. We are failing our students of color. And it's so easy to be drawn into all of the rhetoric and the lies that it's the children's fault, it's the family's fault, it's the community, it's poverty, it's this, it's like it is it
No,
is
it's not.
it is the systems that have been in place since the American public school system was created that we are perpetuating, not intentionally, but out of our ignorance, right? And our biases that need to be examined. And so that's my area. Each of us has an area. And to our women of color, like, again, thank you for continuing to show up. Thank you for being here today, for weaving in your voice. We hear you. Yes, God is absolutely a part of this movement, right? She, he, they are there, just guiding us through every step of this. And I do believe this is the time for women to come together, to unite across difference. Thank you, Kathy, for being here and to join hands and say, we will not stop, right? We are in this together. So I just appreciate having a space to just voice my experiences, and for anyone who can learn from them, and to encourage people to join us in this work.
100%. Thank you so much, Cheryl, for sharing that. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, MB. We're so glad you were a part of the conversation. For white women interested in being part of the cohort, I'm happy to share with you the expression of interest form. Just DM me. We can hop on the phone and get you registered. We're starting on April 21. And it's going to be amazing. The women who are in it are just fantastic. I can't wait for us to get started. And for all women who are interested in building interracial sisterhood, we have an online interracial sisterhood membership community where we can have conversations like this one all the time. We have them twice a month that are open for the community. And the goal of what we're trying to do is to support women across the country to self-form interracial sisterhood circles in their communities. A group of women who agree we're going to start meeting up on a monthly basis. Doesn't have to be fancy, can be for coffee or go for a walk. But just to do a combination of support each other through mutual aid, um, engage in political advocacy and engagement, and just have a really good time and get to know each other and keep growing the circle. The more generations and ethnicities and just all different kinds of diverse women we can get involved, the stronger we will be. But I just love you, Sister Cheryl. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for joining us. And I will put the links in the chat.
All right. Take care. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye.
You know what? Let me just take a minute and I will post those in the chat while we are. Well, you know what? Okay, I'll go ahead and just end it. Okay.